Diversify the Stage is supporting the next generation of music industry leaders. They seek to transform our concerts, events, and touring industries into ones that reflect our diverse communities across all stages through education, mentorship, and workforce training. The DTS Apprenticeship Program is an annual program that offers a 3-phase journey for cohort participants. Malesha Taylor, who will moderate today's discussion, is their Interim Executive Director of DTS. She is originally from Los Angeles, California, with over 20 years experience as a vocal artist, educator, and arts administrator, and is also currently an adjunct professor at California State University, San Marcos, and Clark Atlanta University. Malesha, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you all for being here tonight. I am speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. Although I do teach bi-coastal, I'm on the East Coast, Eastern time. So thank you all for being here. I will be introducing all of our panelists today. Our first panelist is Angela Bowels. She is a production coordinator with Fitz and The Tantrums and a Diversify the Stage alumni. A recent graduate of Tampa University, Angela just wrapped up her first tour with Fitz and the Tantrums as production coordinator. When she's not touring, Angela is an avid fan of strength training and is determined to bring a fresh perspective and to leave a mark on an ever-changing industry. Thank you so much, Angela, for being here with us. And next we have Tammy Blevins. Tammy Blevins is Director of Artist Relations and Travel Services with C3. She is the Director of Artist Relations and Travel Services for Austin, Texas, based C3 Presents. And the world's leading, C3 is the world's leading music festival producer and has been a music industry veteran for 30 years. Tammy has seen firsthand the challenges of people of color on the professional side of the music industry and engages in creative ways to make change from the inside. And finally, we have Rhea Roberts-Johnson, who is Vice President of Ticketing at Goldenvoice. Rhea, did I say your name correctly, or is it Rhea?
It's Rhea.
Rhea. Okay, thank you so much. So yes, this is Rhea, and Rhea oversees ticket operations for over 2,000 events annually in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Canada. She is currently on the Leadership Council of the Black Equity Employee Engagement Group at AEG and a founding member of Goldenvoice Black, an employee-led resource group that guides conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion and steers the company forward in the mission to expand on racial justice. Thank you, Rhea, for being here. Thank you all, our panelists, for being here tonight. I'd like to start off with a question for Angela. Angela is an alumni of Diversify the Stage, and I'd like her to talk about her first tour that she got to do with Fitz and the Tantrums. Any of you ever heard of Fitz and the Tantrums? Any of you guys out there heard of the pop group? Definitely check them out and look them up. Our founder of Diversify the Stage, who is Noel Skaggs, is a singer in the band. And so it's really special to know that Angela is touring with Noel's band and that she was a part of our program. So we're gonna go ahead, Angela, and just have you share what it was like doing this tour with Noel, with everyone, this first tour that you all just wrapped up. Tell us your experience.
Hi, I'm Angela Bowles again. Hi, everyone. I don't know how to describe my first experience. It was very kind of nerve-wracking because I had never done something like this before, but like, you know, everyone kind of gets that imposter syndrome. I definitely had that. And I was like 100% like, you have to get it together. You know, you have to make sure you're organized, this and that. I got advice from my DTS mentor and a lot of other people who were in there. And it was a very nourishing experience. And I could not, like, the best thing that came from it was I learned so much about myself, like my limits, especially because, you know, you get super tired going from place to place to place every night. I had to learn how to sleep on a bus, which was extremely hard for me because I don't know, I wasn't used to it. I can't sleep on planes either. So it was kind of I knew it was going to happen, but, you know, you learn your limits that way. You get to meet all kinds of people. I met so many great people. It was a little weird with the whole COVID thing, you know, like everyone had their limits. That's one thing I don't think I can get over quite yet. But I definitely thought my first tour was a fun experience, and I definitely wouldn't trade it for the world and would highly recommend it if anyone ever gets the chance.
Man, yeah, touring. I have done bus touring, bus and plane touring. So yeah, I know all about the sleeping on the bus, sleeping on the plane, sneaking in like, you know, your little naps when you can. So wow, that sounds incredible. What did you learn from your mentor that helped prepare you for this experience? What are some highlights that you want to share with students that you learned from your mentor?
I think the biggest thing was organizational skills. I thought I was organized until she showed me exactly how she did. And I was like, oh, I gotta step up my game. This is weak. So I think having physical folders is a big deal, making sure that, you know, you have I was very gracious and they gave me a Pelican case so I could keep all my stuff together. But keeping everything organized as far as like cables, what the band needs, what you need, that's really, really big because in my role, like it's all about pleasing the band and making sure everything else is ready for the next day. So you have to make sure you keep them both separate, but also intertwined at the same time.
Absolutely. Wow. Organization being key, attention to detail. That reminds me of Tammy Blevins' talk that you did. I listened to one of your recent interviews where you were talking about figure it outness, right? And I'll never forget that quote. I was telling my mom today, I was like, Mom, figure it outness. My sister is a PA right now. And so we talk about like all the organizational skills you have to have on the fly sometimes, just ready to go and being, you know, willing to figure it out. Tammy, can you break that down for us? What's up with figure it outness? What is that characteristic like?
Oh, what's that characteristic like? It is a little bit like when you're out on, whether you're out on tour or you're in the middle of an event and something happens that you've lost your phone, or an artist wants a vegan meal, not a vegetarian meal. Instead of stopping and looking for someone to ask to solve the problem, you're a smart person, figure it out. To stop, what would you do if that were you and you needed that meal or you lost your phone? What would be your next move? And almost kind of in that moment, try and get things done, because things happen so quickly, whether it's a concert or, you know, a festival. So just, you know, figure it out. We all get into that place where we're so used to being able to turn to somebody and go, hey, how should I do this? We don't always have that person around. And I also find that, you know, creativity is not just about making music or producing music. You have to be creative. If you're doing a budget and you're supposed to save some money and prices have gone up, you've got to get creative. So figure it out, and you can do that. And you don't always have to do it alone. Sometimes figuring out is just grabbing that person that's next to you that maybe you've never said 3 words to before, and now you need them to get with you. It's like, hey, we have to go do this. The band, they're caught down under the bridge. We can't get the bus up there, and the set starts in 20 minutes. You don't have time to go and get someone else. You need to figure it out. And I have to say, I figured out, and it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. I worked with Shani Gordy, who you know very well, works at Goldenvoice, and we used to say that all the time. And I can't remember if she came up with it first or I did, but it was one of us.
Yeah, the figure it outness quote.
Figure it outness.
Right. And so when you think back to your first tour, right? So we've got Angela, who just did her first tour, we've got you with 30 years in touring and travel. Like, can you remember the first time you did a tour and that moment when you found the courage to figure it out? What would you say to young people who are thinking about getting into the field, why figuring it out is so critical in this field?
I probably the first time that happened to me on that's memorable on a large scale was I was selling merch for a friend and I said, yeah, come on, we're going to go for the weekend. We're going to sell merch for this artist. I was working for their manager at the time. And it's going to be great. It's easy. You know, the kids are fine. They were the only artists at the festival that were selling merch. We were completely unprepared for how much the kids wanted to buy. All I had was a canvas like backpack, small like backpack on me that I turned forward, stuffing cash and giving merchandise out to folks and wondering, how are we going to get out of here? Because we are in the middle of this festival. How is it that we're going to get out of here? And I turned around, there was parents who were like sitting in lawn chairs because their kids were out watching this artist perform. And we turned to a couple of them and I just said, can you keep an eye on this? I have to go and get somebody so that we can get out of here. And I don't know what made me turn to that person in particular. Came back. He actually sold some stuff for us while we were gone and got the one of the other production coordinators who came over in a van, got us, we boxed everything up and got out of there. And it was kind of insane. I mean, we weren't in any danger or anything, but it was time to go. And we didn't have an exit plan. We had not figured that out in advance. So we had to, figure out how to get out of there and get to the next show.
Yes, figuring it out on the fly, sometimes without preparation, being able to work well under pressure. These are the things that I hear as you described, figuring it out and figure it outness. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Now let's talk a little bit. You mentioned Goldenvoice. So let's get to Rhea. Rhea, tell us about ticketing and how you got started in that field.
I will say ticketing, there's a lot of figure it outness because most people don't understand ticketing. I actually got into ticketing. When I entered Goldenvoice, I came from the radio field. And coincidentally, my boss who was in radio came to Goldenvoice to help start our country music version of Coachella, which is called Stagecoach. And she asked me to come over and kind of help her out. So that's when I left radio and came to Goldenvoice as a marketer to help market some of our one-offs and help market Stagecoach and Coachella. And there was a ticketing position open and I was looking for some movement and growth, but all the marketing positions were taken that were higher up from where I was at the time. So I was like, let me kind of transition into another field. I have that type of personality where I want to learn everything. It makes you a more well-rounded employee and it makes it make sense as to like how other departments work and how you can work with one another. So at that time, a ticketing opportunity opened up and I went for it and actually loved it because I love the independence in ticketing. I love the figure it outness of ticketing. Every show, every artist, every venue, every tour, every production is completely different from the last one. We are based here in Los Angeles. So as you can imagine, this market is extremely busy at all times. Goldenvoice owns and operates about 10 venues right here in Los Angeles. And then we obviously have a lot of festivals under our umbrella as well. So always busy. Ticketing is a great entry point to the music business. And I tell people that all the time because just like Tammy, it's one of those positions where you touch every single department. In ticketing, I work with artist management, agents, production managers, general managers of venues, talent buyers, talent agents, accountants, every single department. So it's one of those things when you enter ticketing, if you don't necessarily like ticketing, you've touched so many different departments along the way that you could kind of figure out if you want to move somewhere else.
Right. And so students thinking about the different kinds of jobs in the industry, you may have not known that ticketing had so many facets to it, right? When you think of buying a ticket to a show, you don't necessarily think of all of these components, like who's in the audience, how to market the show, who's sitting in what row and why, who's a VIP, why certain parts of the audience are roped off for certain groups. You have educational groups that come in, you have community engagement, you've got politicians that are coming and big known stars that have certain accommodations. You have differently abled folks that you work with. And then I recall when I did some interface with ticketing, I was doing audience development and diversity for shows that were trying to ensure ethnic diversity in the audience. And I had to interface a lot with ticketing and kind of getting certain folks into tickets and getting tickets out to parts of different communities that didn't know that they could have access to some of these shows, and giving free tickets away or giving discounted tickets, getting to know people in community. Do you interface a lot with community in your role in ticketing?
Absolutely. Like you said, we do a lot of community outreach. We have different events where that's actually part of what the artist wants, is for us to tap in with the community. So there's different groups that we work with. We work with military groups. We work with children's homes a lot. We work with downtown. We're based right in downtown LA. So Skid Row is right around the corner. We work with some of the missions down there as well. So yes, definitely tapping in with the community daily.
Daily. That is huge. That is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So let's see. Who would like to share the biggest piece of advice that you have learned in this field so far that you would tell a high schooler? I'll let any one of you.
Yep. Don't be scared.
Yep.
Don't be afraid to try something that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone, or you think that, I don't know if I would be interested in that. How do you know? Go and try it. You might find out that you're actually really good at it, and it opens up a skill set or something that you didn't realize that you had, which is kind of what happened, to me. So just don't be afraid to try something new, and don't be afraid to fail. Because that's how we learn and move forward. And go for it.
A lot of that figure it outness that we've developed throughout our careers comes from failing. So a lot of times you think that you're doing the right thing, and it ends up being a failure. So for the next time, like, okay, let me try something different, and usually it ends up working out. But like Tammy said, don't be afraid to fail, because that's the only way you learn. And in this business, what I've really learned is there's no training. We kind of have this mentality where it's sink or swim, and a lot of us have sunk before we learn how to swim. So yeah, it's taking chances and taking risks. I would also say that, don't compare your journey or your career path to somebody else's. It's so easy to do that, especially, with social media nowadays. It's so easy to compare somebody else's life to your own and have the grass is greener syndrome, or look at somebody else's career path. We all grow at a different pace. There's different things that happen throughout our careers where some people may elevate a little quicker, some people may take a slower path, but I would say just trust your own journey and focus on your own career path, and don't worry about what other people are doing.
Absolutely. And speaking of all this, talking of fear and this, I see some questions in the chat about networking advice. And what do you do if you're a shy person? What do you do if you don't have an internship? What are some ways that we can get into this field? What networking advice would you offer?
Wow.
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Angela. You go, please.
I mean, I'm still pretty new at all this, but like, I think the best way for me to really get out there, I kind of found my footing once I got a little bit more confident in my abilities and in myself. So I would say like start there, like definitely be more confident in yourself, but also just don't be afraid to like talk to anybody. If somebody else looks just as awkward as you are, chances are they're afraid to do the exact same thing that you're doing. So there's nothing wrong with talking to people or simply asking a question. Like if you see something and you're new at it and you don't know what's going on, just be like, hey, what is that? Because I'm curious and I'd like to know. And that way you can strike up a conversation, and then that leads into them talking to other people, and you suddenly have a group.
Absolutely. Yes. Other advice on networking, Rhea and Tammy.
I would say volunteer where you can and when you can. A lot of folks entered this business by volunteering somewhere first. In our festival circuit, there's a lot of folks who volunteered at the festival in exchange for like tickets or something early on, and now they're in managerial positions. So it's a great opportunity to get your foot in the door. Like Angela said, speak to people. Like if you're interested, for example, in a job at the box office and you go to a show, talk to the people there and ask how they got there and where you're hiring. How can I access your hiring database? Is there a link that I could go to? Can I have your contact information? I get that all the time from people who are interested in working at our venues or at our festivals, and 9 times out of 10, people are going to be receptive to you and just say like, hey, this is how you do it. So yeah, don't be afraid to speak up if it's something that you're interested in.
Absolutely. Tammy, would you like to add? Yes.
Well, I think both of them gave great advice. You know, just be open to having conversations with people. If you go to shows and there's intermissions and you start having conversations with folks, you never know who it is that you're talking to. That's what happened to me. I was at a show with watching an artist that I enjoyed, and I struck up a conversation with someone who just happened to be their manager. And that was the first job I had. I moved across the country to open fan mail. It used to come in the mail back in the day. And you know, log names in databases and send them postcards when the band was going to go out. And that's what I started doing. It wasn't, you know, a glamorous job, but you got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. Other thoughts I'm thinking about is imposter syndrome. We talked a little bit about that. That may be a new term for some of our students who may have not heard of the syndrome. Angela, was it you that brought up imposter syndrome, or who was it? Was it Tammy?
Yeah,
Angela.
It was me.
Yes, Angela, can you break down how you overcome imposter syndrome? What is it like to get over those feelings? And how would you define imposter syndrome for those who don't know what that is?
Well, I would define imposter syndrome as, that's a loaded question. So I would probably define it as when you're doing a job and you feel like you aren't right for that role, despite having the qualifications to do so. So sometimes, like if you're in a new job and you don't exactly know all of the qualifications, everything that you need to be doing on a daily basis, you may feel that you are not able to do it, but that's okay. You kind of have to just, you know, shoot your shot, go for it. And if you have the confidence, if you have the ability and that background knowledge that's there, you will be fine. Like people, sometimes too, you might have to just be like, hey, am I doing this okay? And then somebody might have to give you some words of advice or some feedback, which there's nothing wrong with feedback. Always take feedback. And I mean, that's a good way to get over it, but like at the same time, it can still come back. But even when it does come back, just reassure yourself that you are here for a reason and you earned it.
That's right. That is right. I'd like to lift up the issue of diversity, right? All of us here are women of color. I know that in my experience, I studied classical music. That was my entry point into the industry, was in classical music. And I was oftentimes the only Black person in many spaces that I worked in music. Even in theater, as a thespian, even in high school, I was the only Black girl on stage. Can you guys speak to that? Do you have experiences where you come into a space and you're the only person of color, the only woman, and how you have navigated in this field in those situations?
Rhea, you first.
Absolutely. Historically, in the live music business, there has been a lack of diversity. And, you know, up until last year, to be completely honest, nobody really paid attention to it. Like, obviously, me going into a room and being the only Black woman, I definitely felt it and knew it. But I think on the other side of things, this industry is really male driven, and it's predominantly white. Last year, I will say that some colleagues at Goldenvoice and we came together and formulated an internal group called Goldenvoice Black. And this came out of us organically having conversations about the lack of diversity in the live music business. And, you know, there's a lot of artists on stage that look like me and have a mic in their hand, but that representation has been lacking on the back end. And we have made it our mission to expose this industry more to people of color and people in predominantly BIPOC communities. That's one of our huge initiatives. And so I have seen it across the industry, especially, you know, since the George Floyd murder, that people are being much more intentional about opening up this industry and having these types of conversations and platforms that are targeting people of color. How have I navigated through it? I can't say it's always been easy, but I've always, you know, gone into a room, done my best job, been extremely respectful. And I've always had these conversations, whether it be on this platform or internally at this organization, about the importance of diversity. And at the end of the day, diversity wins. It's a win for everybody, and we're seeing it in real time now.
Definitely.
Big time. That's amazing. How long have you been a part of this equity group at Goldenvoice? Is it relatively in the last year or so, you said?
Well, we started having these conversations, I would say around like 2018, and formulating what it was and what it would look like. But after the murder of George Floyd, the head of Goldenvoice told us, like, hey, we want to give you a platform to kind of put this organization out there. And so at the time he said, Coachella, that's one of our biggest properties. It has millions of followers. So we want you to use our social handles to go on and do what you need to do. So that's kind of when we made it public to the outside and to our fan base, and said there's a resource within Goldenvoice, and we're working extremely hard, not only to diversify our workforce, but to diversify our vendors and everything, the whole ecosystem of the music business and what we do here at Goldenvoice. So we just had a festival this past weekend, Day in Vegas, which was our very first festival where we've been able to implement some of our initiatives. And it was a beautiful sight to see. One of the reasons that we wanted to start implementing our initiatives specifically at Day in Vegas is the lineup. It was a hip hop festival. The lineup was predominantly Black. I would say about 98% of the lineup was Black artists. And it was extremely important for us to make sure that we had community engagement element to it. We tapped in with UNLV and the Clark County School District to do things like this, have panel discussions targeting BIPOC students who have an interest in the live music business. When I was in high school, I didn't even know this side of the business existed. I knew that there were concerts. I knew that there were festivals. Obviously, they weren't as big as they are now, but I didn't know that you could be in artist relations. I didn't know you could be a production assistant. I didn't know you could be the head of ticketing. I didn't even know what it was. So it's in our plan to start planting these seeds early on within our communities so that students like yourselves know that this does exist and that there are opportunities in this business outside of being on stage with a mic in your hand. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be an artist all day, that's great and pursue that. But you can also be in the music business and make a good living and be behind the scenes.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Anyone else want to add to that before I pass it on to Mr. Blackburn, who can, yes, Tammy.
I'll be brief. One of the things working at C3, I worked with them as a contractor for many, many years and just went full-time in 2013. And for the first, 10 years, I was the two of us there that were Black people that were there. And at the time, I'm a single mom. My daughter just went to college. So I feel like the skies have opened up and I'm like, wow, okay, there's life out here. Let's go, let's do this. It's not, and fortunately, the partners at C3, they never held me back. They supported me, and sometimes literally with my daughter, going through the years so that I could, work and stay engaged. But what I found when we, about 6 years ago, we moved, and we're in Austin, Texas. We moved to the east side of Austin. Which is a much more diverse neighborhood that we moved into. And it was actually one of the my other colleagues at work who said, hey, we're in a predominantly like Black and brown neighborhood doing rock shows. And we are like the whitest thing out here as a company. And there's one of the oldest HBCUs 2 blocks from our office, and our current internship program leaves them out of the opportunities because we just do unpaid internships. And so it's like, the guy said, you're right. We all got together, developed an apprenticeship program that's paid internship that works directly with HT. And the goal is to give that person a job at the end of the apprenticeship, where they work with different departments within the company. And that was going great. And then March 2020 hit and everything kind of fell apart. But we're starting that back up again. And just like Rhea was saying, it 2020, and I think it's I've had some folks say, well, was it George Floyd? He wasn't the first, Black man to be murdered by police. And I said, you know what? I think it was because we were all sent home and we were basically trapped for that first month or so. We were literally afraid to leave our homes, right? They were saying, go home, and we'll call you when it's time to come back. And people had to face and confront their own biases and prejudices, including people of color. We also would have our own, we'd be in our tunnel. Okay, I've got my opportunity. I'm going to look out for myself. It's just, and you have to stop and kind of look around. You go, wow, this is not good. Like, what are we going to do about this? The hamster wheel stopped, and we all had to take a look at ourselves in the mirror and think, like, is this really the space that we want to work in and live in? Is this, and for that, I'm grateful for 2020, to be honest, that it did make us slow down and really face the challenges that we have as people of color in this space, and how to get more diversity in the workplace, because that's where diverse ideas come from. Whether you're Black or LGBTQ or woman, or that great ideas come from people bringing in their different experiences to the table.
Yes,
sharing those. So, and hopefully we're all going to move forward with those plans, and it's not just this kumbaya moment, and then in a year and a half we're back on the hamster wheel. And
no,
don't let it go.
Yes, we are coming off the hamster wheel. That is the goal.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, let's look at some questions in the chat. and see what our students are asking. Some really great questions, Mr. Blackburn. Would you like to share some of your some questions that you highlighted here in the chat?
Absolutely. Our first one is from Jaden in Roanoke. Jaden, do you want to unmute and ask the question?
Yeah, for sure. So my question was more or less about, you were mentioning like figuring out and figuring outness. And I was just kind of wondering more of how do you go about kind of making it more natural? Because obviously for me it's like, oh yeah, just figure it out. Like, especially when you're in high school and everything's kind of like spoon fed to you a little bit. It's like you don't fully get the full idea of that figuring outness. So I was wondering if you can kind of broaden up on that and how we do it like outside of school and in our lives in the music industry.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Outside of school or inside of school, what do you like to do? What's your favorite thing to do?
Well, I do this classroom right here. Everything back here that you see, this is what I love to do. My music teacher can tell you right now, like I spend so much time in this classroom playing with, we have a piano right here in front of me as we speak, playing the piano, doing the guitar, doing music at school with this amazing opportunity that we were offered at our school. And considering the fact that our school is like one of the more diverse schools in where we come from, it definitely gave me hope that for me as a person of color, that even I can sit around the table with songwriters and things like that and expand for myself.
So I'm willing to bet that within your school setting, with the other students and friends that you've made in the music classes, that you guys have been in situations together where you're trying to figure out a piece of music, or you couldn't get, a chord progression right on the guitar, and you stuck with it and try different. You probably looked things up on the internet, went and listened to YouTube. You're figuring it out. That's all that means. So whether you're trying to figure out a piece of music and how to play it, or trying to figure out how to make this formula work in this Excel spreadsheet, that you're doing, that's all that means. So wherever space that you're in, and especially if you have the passion that I can tell that you do about music, that's all that means. Is in that space, don't be afraid to just try new things. You fail, that's not going to work. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do something else until you get in it. And that experience, I'm in my 50s now. It doesn't stop, and it's great. I love it. I'm still learning and open to learning all the time, so that's what figure it outness means. It's that whatever space that you're in, whatever interest that you have, you're passionate about. Okay, I don't know how to, get, this chord right, and why doesn't it sound good? Is it the piano? And you're going to navigate through that, whether you're talking to other people or whether you're, like I said, you're going to look at videos online. You're figuring out how to take that next step forward, no matter how small or big it is. And I'm sure that you're a much better musician now than you were 2 years ago, and you'll be a much better one in 2 years from now, and in 20 years from now, when you you'll master it. So that's it. You're already doing it and you didn't even know it.
Love that.
That's incredible. We have a few questions. I do want to roll back just a tiny little bit. Matt, you had a question that was just like this one. Do you want to unmute?
Sure. My question was, what's the difference between figuring it outness and knowing when it's a good time to ask for help?
I think they can go together. Sometimes you figure out that you need to ask for help, Absolutely.
That is the truth. That is the truth. Yes.
That was a nice, easy answer on that one. We have a question from Aaliyah. Aaliyah, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, everybody. My name is Aaliyah. I am also an alumni of Diversify the Stage. And my question would have to be, being from the South, I've kind of been confirming now since I've graduated that I'm going to have to make a transition and move for better opportunities. So I'm starting a little bit of that now. I have an internship in Philadelphia. I'm a little nervous about moving out there. So what tips do you guys have for life after relocation?
Make friends. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Make friends and to reach out. It can be daunting, especially the first few months. And when you're feeling really homesick and you're thinking, I made a big mistake and I want to go home, don't. Go for a visit and come back. Don't give up.
I definitely recommend Facebook groups too. Those are always good.
Good young advice, Angela. That's good. I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, building relationships and finding a local network of people that you connect with, whether it be in your career or elsewhere in other aspects of your life, is really important, because then you're creating your own support group, and that just makes things a little bit easier when you're away from your friends and family.
Absolutely. And Aaliyah, I applaud you on your effort to come out of the South to go up to Philly. I too did some traveling in my career. I started in LA, but I did move to New York and lived there for 3 years. And then I also lived in Europe for a year. And now I live in Atlanta. And definitely moving to different cities in this field is a plus. You're going to make a lot of friends in different cities. You want to definitely stay in touch with your network, no matter where you go. So stay in touch with the people you leave back home. Stay in touch with the people you meet in Philly. Definitely hit New York City while you're in Philly. Do not leave New York out. Go to Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an amazing place for Black women, period. And another piece of advice is travel light and go to everything. Go to events, go to people's shows, go to free shows, go to spoken word, go where places where artists are all the time, art galleries, museums, openings, receptions, meet other creative people that are doing things. Those are the spaces where you'll meet a lot of creative folks. Try not to do the same stuff that you may have done at home. Try to explore new spaces and be open-minded in your new city. Like, actually be a tourist and go see the hot spots and show up. And don't be afraid to be alone sometimes, to go to movies alone, to go to restaurants alone. You're going to do that for a couple of weeks, but you'll eventually start to get a rhythm for the city and meet more folks as you explore your new city. So have fun in Philly. Philly is an amazing town. You will love it. And do all the things.
Embrace the train system in that part of the country. Philly, DC, New York. You've got all with just hours away. So much fun.
And they have the best food.
Oh, man.
Thank you all for your transparency. Thank you so much.
Yes.
That was an awesome question. Let's see. We had, so for all of our panelists, this is a classic question that normally we have at least a couple students ask every time. But Rebecca, do you want to ask the classic quintessential question to all of our panelists?
Sure. I don't remember which one of you mentioned fear and being scared or not being scared of being scared, but I was curious to know maybe your scariest moment or maybe your biggest obstacle in your career, and how did you get over that fear?
I've had a lot of them. I still have them. I can't identify just one moment, like a scariest moment, because there's been so many of them. Luckily, I work with some really, really great people. So again, this is where this whole figure it outness comes into play. I've had shows before where the power went out and we're trying to get everybody into the venue, but the scanners are down, sold out shows, and the artist is about to hit the stage. And then that's when you tap in and say like, hey, operations manager, I need some help here. We need to figure out how we're going to get 5,000 people in this venue in the next hour. There's been a bunch of different things. So I would say tap into that figure it outness. That's what's really, really, really helped me, and relying on my colleagues, trusting my colleagues, building relationships with your colleagues so that you do have that level of trust and respect for one another, to help get you through tough situations.
Definitely. And I've had, like Rhea said, I've had some scary moments. My scariest one was when I was working, and it didn't even involve work specifically. It was in DC, and it was, my daughter and her grandmother were sightseeing. She was 11. They were leaving and, coming back into the city. And my daughter thought that she could hold the subway doors for grandma. And they closed on her and took off. And, I got a really scary call from my daughter from a phone number I didn't recognize. And my 11-year-old just, she kind of figured it out. And I spoke to, it happened to be, when I said, whose phone is that? And she's like, this man. And my heart sunk down to my stomach. I thought I was going to be sick, and took a deep breath. And he got on the phone and spoke to me and said, okay, this is where we are. No idea. He's like, look, trust me, and I will bring her to you. And I literally said to him, you already have her, so I have to trust you. And, he's now one of our best friends, and I'm about to officiate his wedding. So there's lots of scary moments, but it's like, you got to follow your gut, trust a little bit, and just rely on the people around you to come through for you and be sincere. So that was scary, but we figured it out.
Yes, figuring it out requires a lot of emotional intelligence. That's something I was just thinking with a lot of what we've been talking about. We're talking about things like courage. We're talking about things like keeping a straight face in a panic. One of the things I can definitely say is not like the biggest thing with fear to me is admitting or being seen at fault. If you have done something wrong, and you either have to admit that you did it wrong, or everyone knows you did it wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? Like the spotlight is on you. We know that you did it. It's either that everyone saw you do it, or you have to raise your hand and say, I did it. Those are usually the scariest moments in this field for me. And the most important thing that I've learned is to be okay with accepting fault, or being okay to announce that you've made a mistake, because it's better that you can announce that you made the mistake and own the mistake, and then try to recover or fix that mistake and show that you sincerely care to fix that mistake. Because when you hide a mistake or you try to sneak away, you actually create more problems. Because then everyone's going to investigate and figure out who, and if they find out it's you and you didn't admit it, that's like the worst. That's worse than just saying, I did it, it was my fault. So one of the things in theater that I always learned, and in music, is to raise your hand when you make the mistake. Just put it up first. No one has to look around. I messed up. I did it. I am wrong. I won't do it again. And you have to have emotional intelligence and courage to do that. But it definitely pays off in this field for sure.
And, I would add to that and say, if you find that there's like a specific skill set that you're not great at, that you haven't really mastered, it's okay to kind of reach. I still have, when I have to write something, I still have, send it off to someone and go, can you proof this? because I'm just seeing the same thing over and over. And, you know, a period's a comma's a semicolon. I guess I was asleep during that part of class. And I'm not, and getting over the fear that like, you know, oh, I should know how to do this by now. It's like, this is just not a strong suit of mine. You know, could you look at this for me and edit? Absolutely no problem. Instead of sending something off and then getting it back going, you know, red lined and this is wrong. And it's like, it's, you know, spelled this way, not just, it's okay. Ask for help. If it's not your strong suit, sometimes it's quicker just to get someone, you know, proof this for me, send it back. Even if I think I know I've got it down, I still will send it to someone, colleague, one of our managers, and say, just take a look at this. I've been staring at this spreadsheet for 2 hours and I have no idea what I did wrong. And it could be something simple, but I can't see it anymore because, and it's okay that I didn't do it myself. I asked for help. We got it done, and it's teamwork. It's just about the collective. It's not always just about you.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I feel like we put more pressure on ourselves than our teams do. And especially when you're like in a position of leadership, you put that pressure on yourself to know everything. But the reality of it is this is an ever evolving business and things are changing on a daily basis, sometimes by the hour, and it's unrealistic to know everything or to expect to know everything. So like Tammy said, relying on people or the experts in that respective area is really, really key. I just had something today where I was asked to put together a crazy budget, and most of my budgets are done on Excel sheets, but I went to our accountant who knows everything about it, and it was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help? He said, sure, and gave me an hour of his time. And now I feel more confident going into the process just by asking somebody who knows more about it than I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Angela, any final words for us? We're going to be wrapping up. And I know that you did have you're newer to the field and learning, and in this process of possibly even making mistakes, asking for help, receiving mentorship and guidance. Any final words about that for our students?
I would definitely say don't be afraid to ask questions, kind of like everyone else was saying. I've made plenty of mistakes in my first few months doing this, but at the end of the day, like even what you were saying, you got to own up to it. And once you do, people are going to be a lot more willing to help you. And I think that's the most important thing. Just make sure that you own up to it so somebody else can know that they might need to help you or they might need to, you know, nourish you a little bit.
Absolutely right. Beautiful. Well, are there any other questions in the chat before we pass it back to Rebecca? Any final words from our panelists that you'd like to leave us all with?
And don't give up. Just keep moving forward, you guys. Follow your dreams. What else are you going to do? Time's going to go past whether you like it or not. So just go for what you really love.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add to that too. I know we're almost post-pandemic, almost, but I didn't have a lot of hope for getting a job in the industry, but there's a lot more hope because everyone is trying to come back. Everyone is trying to do something. So there's always an opportunity, whether you like it or not.
Absolutely right. Beautiful. Rhea, any final words?
Yeah, just make sure you're taking risk and building meaningful relationships and connections along the way. It's extremely important. They say this business is based off of, it's who you know, not what you know. And I would say it's a combination of both, but the relation aspect to this business is going to be really important in your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Rebecca, I will pass right on back to you. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists, for your warmth, for your candor, for sharing from the heart with all of us today, and for all this great advice. I hope students, all of you, got some golden gems from this conversation. And so Rebecca, I'll go ahead and have you close. Thank you so much.